Good morning, Morai Barabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Succah, and we are on Daf Bet, Amud Bet, 20 lines up from the bottom of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Refuah Shelema for Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, that should have full recovery, Refuah Shelema Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Also, as a Refuah Shelema for the little girl that had the fire incident, Esther Bracha Bat Chaya, that should have Refuah Shelema Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. This week's learning has been graciously dedicated by the Shei family, Dayan family, Kohen family. Should be an ultimate zchut for all their mishpachot. Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. The learning of Chodesh Tishrei also has been dedicated Leilui Nishmat Shlomo ben Yitzchak Chaim. His neshama should have an aliyah, and also by Rosen family as a zchut for the safety of the soldiers and the speedy return of all of the chatufim, all the hostages. The sponsors of Amud Yomi for this week also include Dr. Yoram Nasir in memory of Avraham ben Yehuda, should have his neshama should have an aliyah, and also for Refuah Shelema of Sharon ben Rivka, should have full recovery, Refuah Shelema Be'ezrat Hashem. Amen. Now we spoke about Masechet Sukkah, and a little inspiring word every time that we start. In the beginning, there's much to be said about Masechet Sukkah in general, but you know, the Gimatria of Sukkah is, if you count it quickly for those Gimatria gurus, is 91, and you say 85. So, well, depends really if it's going to be with the Vav or without the Vav. Once you said this, by the way, another cute issue is, Rabbi Gaon used to say, every person should know one Masechta at least by heart. You have to know one Masechta. It should be your Olam Haba Masechta, so to speak. And many Jews around the world, they have an Olam Haba Masechta. They have a Gemara Masechta that they know by heart. They literally know it by heart. It may not be by heart, word by word, but they could tell you every daf what exactly goes on through the daf. Many of them know the entire Masechta by heart. Taking on this Lagaon, it could be a short Masechta, but we can say, look, imagine how many minutes a person wastes during the day. You're walking, you're waiting for the bus, you're waiting for a Brit, you're waiting for this. If you know a Masechta by heart, you could be constantly involved in learning. So someone learned this from the Vilna Gaon in his time in Vilna. A few months before Sukkot, he said, I'm going to memorize Masechet Sukkah. So he went and he chazered Masechet Sukkah so many times. So he comes to Vilna Gaon, that was his mistake, to be tested, right? He comes and says, I know Masechet Sukkah cold, so test me. So Vilna Gaon says, okay, fine, so tell me how many cases of Sukkah Kshera there is in the entire Masechta. That means how many examples of a kosher Sukkah does the Gemara give in the entire Masechta? How many puzzle cases there are in the entire Masechta? And those are difficult questions. You have to mamash know, and we're not going to do the entire Shas like that, the entire Kotar Kula like that. And the guy is like, I have no idea. How many machloket Abai Ravas? How many machloket Rabba and Rabba, and Rabba and Rabbi Yosef? And so on and so forth. The person, of course, was bewildered by the idea of knowing anything like that. But the Vilna told him, I'm not sure if anyone has actually tested this going through the entire Masechta. Vilna told him there are 91 cases of a Sukkah Kshera in the entire Masechta, the Gimatria of Sukkah with a Vav, which is written Maleh, and a Sukkah that's written Chaser is 85. As you mentioned, that there are 85 scenarios of a Sukkah Psula in the entire Masechta. That gives a whole different depth and breadth to what Chazal had in mind when they wrote a Masechta. How many layers of depth. And okay, Sukkah, we say, according to Zohar Kadosh, is Sila de Mehemnuta, you're sitting under the cell of Shechina. We say this just in a very nonchalant way, but really the number 91 is the name of Shechina. if you add up the name of Adnut, right, Aleph and Dalet and Nun and Yud, together with Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name of Havaya is really exactly 91, which it's actually very precise because 65 is on the outside and the Chaf Vav is in the inside. So that is the surrounding of the Shekhinah with the name of Havaya. The tremendous levels of depth in the Sukkah. We learn the surface level of the basic laws of what Sukkah is kasher and what's not, but really what we are dealing with has the same Gemarot that the Mishnayot and Gemarot that we're learning have so many levels of Pardes, of Pshat, Remez, Drash, Sod, of the way our connection with the name of Shekhinah is really our connection with Klali, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what it is, right? Kudshabrichu Shechinte is Knesset Israel with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which again we come together in Sukkah in that very special way, leading up to Shmini Atzeret, which is like a yichud of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Am Yisrael. Again, there are many levels of amazing depth, of beautiful insight, which maybe as we go through the Masechta we'll discuss some of them in Mitzvah. So we are.
Also, Gematria B'Amen.
That's correct. Yeah, Gematria B'Amen, which again gets into this whole thing of Kol Ha'oneh Amen, the Gadol Ha'oneh Amen, Yoter Min HaMevarech, that answering Amen is even greater than saying the bracha itself, which needs a lot of explanation of why it is that you're now agreeing with the Shevach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, becoming one with it at the same time, and so on, which again would be for a different time. But 20 lines up from the bottom of the Amud is we're holding in Daf Bet, Amud Bet. A quick recap of what we did is we had three-way machloket Amoraim of why the Sukkah that is higher than 20 amot, about 30 feet tall, is pasul. Now, our Mishnah had a machloket, right? Chachamim say it's pasul, Rabbi Yehuda says it's kasher. Why Chachamim hold is pasul is a three-way machloket. Amoraim, Rabbah said it's because you don't see the schach. It has to be Leman Yadu Dorotechem. You have to know whenever you enter the sukkah that you are sitting under the schach. And 20 amot is too tall. Your eyes don't catch it, right? To which the Gemara said, well, there is a case that would be good. Rav Hoshaya said, if you have walls that reach up to the schach, then everybody agrees. Even Chachamim agree. That will be kasher because your eye follows the wall and you see the schach, and that would be fine. Then we had Rabbah and Rab Zera, both of which said it has to do with the shiur of the sukkah. Because Rab Zera said, when you're sitting in a sukkah that is so tall, you are not sitting in the cell of the schach, you're sitting in the cell of the walls. And the pasuk says in Yeshaya Hanavi, "V'sukat yeletzel yomam." The schach has to be the cell, not the walls. And Rava said what? What's the reason? Because it has to be flimsy. It has to be a 7-day structure. If it's a 7-day structure, the Torah is telling you it has to be something that could be made flimsy and temporarily if you wanted to. Something that's 30 foot tall, you cannot build it flimsy. You cannot build it temporarily. You have to really make it strong and sturdy for it to stand. So therefore, that's the cutoff line. Above 30 foot, if you have already 20 amot, it's pasul, right? To which the Gemara said, Rav Huna and Rav Chana bar Rabba, they both said it's a matter of how small and how big it is. Because everybody agrees that there are cases that Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda both agree that it could be tall enough. In other words, our Mishnah that says a sukkah that's above 20 is pasul is only certain specific scenarios. I could find, according to everyone, a scenario that the tall sukkah would be kasher. Now, what is the scenario? when would it be kasher? Well, according to Avoshaya, if the walls reach the schach, it's kasher regardless of how tall it is. You want to make it 50 feet tall, chazak u'baruch. Just make sure the walls reach up to the schach, and this way, eye of a person follows the wall, sees the schach, you're good to go. The only case that it is not kasher when it's too tall is if the walls do not reach the schach. That's what he says. On the other hand, Rav Huna says, no, it depends on the size. The only time that the sukkah that is too tall is pasul is if it's a tiny sukkah. If you have a massive, large, nice sukkah, then it would be kasher according to everyone. So when you read the very first Mishnah in Masechet Succah, that Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Yehuda and they say the sukkah can't be too tall, they're only talking about a small, tiny sukkah. Less than 7, well, not less than 7, only 7 tfachim by 7 tfachim, or only 4 amot by 4 amot, depending on which shita. But if you have a nice, large, beautiful sukkah, according to Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, it's kasher even if it's taller than 20. Fine? Now, why am I saying this? Because the Gemara is going to now examine this machloket based on a story that Rabbi Yehuda brings. Now, just a stam yedi'ah for you to have when you go through Shas, and it's good to have these yedi'ahs because it's not written anywhere, but when you have your experience of going through Shas, you'll examine them against your mind. Rabbi Yehuda likes to always bring proofs to his cases from stories that happened, from Masechet Succah, right? And he's going to do that again here. He's going to have a fantastic story to prove a point that the Gemara brings as a braita parallel to our Mishnah, and then the Gemara takes this braita and asks a question on what the Gemara just said that we reviewed. So let's read the braita together, right? Now, we know what the braita and Mishnah is, right? Mishnah is the compendium of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi when he brought the Torah Sheba'al Peh together, and his student, his top student, his Talmid Chaver also did the same thing. It was almost like a competition. Rambam writes in his Haktamatu Pirusha Mishnayot that Rebbe wrote a sefer, and his student Rabbi Chia also wrote a sefer. Imagine lahavdil if nowadays the two people would write a sefer and they would name them, and the two Svarim are trying to do the same thing. They were trying to encapsulate the entirety of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Rebbe called his sefer Mishnah, and Rabbi Chia called his sefer Braita, right? So Braitas are also Tanaic works, and a Braita says the following. Listen to what the Braita says. Metive. Now, the Gemara in the Bet Midrash, Chachamim of the Bet Midrash asked a question on what we just explained as a review of yesterday from this Braita. But let's first read the Braita. This is what the Braita says. Sukkah she'i gevurah lemala me-20 amah. It's very much parallel to our Mishnah in the beginning of Masechet Succah. If you have a sukkah that's taller than 20 amot, 30 feet almost, psula, it is pasul. But Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it's kasher. Ad 40 ו-50, even up to 40 and 50 amot, still is kasher. Tosafot says, is lav dafka 40 or 50, even more. Even 100 amot. As tall as you want. It's kasher. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, here's what Rabbi Yehuda brings a story to support his position. Says Rabbi Yehuda, Maaseh behilini amalka. There's a story with Hiloni Amalka. Who's Hiloni Amalka? Anyone knows? The Gemara, Queen Hiloni, the famous Queen Hiloni, that no one knows the story. The Gemara says in Yuma, of Lamed Zayin, that she was the mother of Mumbaz HaMelech. Mumbaz the king. Really, in Seder Adorot, she is viewed perhaps as a Goyish queen that converted with all of her children, 7 sons she had, to Judaism at the era of the last generation before the Churban, Beit Sheni, before the second Beit HaMikdash destruction. But be that as it may, Hilani Amalka was a very wealthy, famous, she was a queen, right? And she made a sukkah. And her sukkah was a very popular sukkah, right? It's a sukkah that all the Chachamim visited during Chol HaMoed. They went to pay their respect to the mother of the king or to whoever this Hilani Amalka is. And Rabbi Yehuda says, let me tell you a story about the sukkah of Hilani Amalka. She lived in Lud, and her sukkah was massive, ginormous sukkah, fit for the kings, and it was certainly taller than 20 amot. And yet, guess who visited that sukkah? Oh, the Chachamim! Every Rosh Yeshiva and Rosh Kollel and Rav in town and out of town will go to visit her on Chol HaMoed. So says the Gemara, Velo amru lah davar, and they didn't say a word to her. And if the sukkah would be pasul, says Rabbi Yehuda, they would say a word to her. Right? You think they're afraid of a queen? They would say. So from the fact that Chachamim visited this sukkah and didn't say anything, says Rabbi Yehuda, I have a Meiser Rav. I have a proof that I am right. Fine. Says the Gemara, Amru lo Chachamim say Misham Ra'aya. That's a proof. Guess who's patur from sukkah? Women. Right? Women are not mitzvah. It's a mitzvah that says Shazman Grama, for God's sake. This is a positive, time-bound mitzvah. Classic patur for women. Isha ita ptura mina sukkah. Amar lahe, Rabbi Yehuda says, I understand that. But do you know that she had 7 sons? V'halo shiv'a banim hayula. She has 7 sons. And even if they would be back to back to back to back, the oldest of them would not need the mother, would be the age old enough not to need his mother. Amar lahen, ve'alo shiv'a banim hayula, ve'od, and additionally to that, kol ma'aseh lo asta ela al pi chachamim. She did everything based on chachamim. She was subordinate completely to the psak of chachamim. The Gemara says, why do you have to say 2 reasons? Why do you have to tell me that she did everything according to Chachamim? So he explains, Rabbi Yehuda. He says, Hachi Kamer, this is what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Ki tomru banim ketanim ayu. If you want to tell me that the sons were below bar mitzvah, she had 7 sons. So maybe they were above bar mitzvah, which then a sukkah you built for them legally has to be a kosher sukkah. But even if you want to tell me they were back to back to back to back little kids, when you have 7 sons, at the very least, the oldest one is not going to be too young. It's going to be what, 7, 8, 9? And he's not going to be at age that needs his mother in the middle of the night. So says the Gemara, Kevan de Shiv'ayu, because there were 7 sons, it's impossible that at least one of them would not need the mother. And therefore, a katan that doesn't need his mother in the middle of the night, midrabanan is chayav besukkah, right? So you want to ask what age your sons should be sleeping in the sukkah at night, right? A kid that doesn't need the mother at night should be sleeping in the sukkah, should be eating in the sukkah, should be dwelling in the sukkah. That's the age for chinuch, right? A katan that could be wearing tzitzit and keeping the tzitziot clean should be wearing tzitzit, right? Every mitzvah has its own age of chinuch. What is the age of chinuch for sukkah? Is an age that the katan doesn't need his mother anymore. It's not somewhat independent and could be in the sukkah. So says Rabbi Yehuda, impossible that at least 1 out of 7 was not old enough to be chayav midrabanan, to sit and to sleep and to dwell and live in the sukkah. And says Rabbi Yehuda, maybe you'll argue that she was this convert woman and she didn't care much about the Rabbanans. Maybe she only kept the Deoraitas, not the Rabbanans. V'chitomru. And if you want to tell me that Katan sheno sarich leimo mid'Rabbanan, who it's only mid'Rabbanan that you have the mitzvah of chinuch for this Katan to sit in the sukkah, and maybe ihi b'drabanan lo mashkecha, maybe she didn't care much about mitzvot Rabbanan, chas v'shalom. Tashema v'od kol ma'aseha lo asta ela al pi chachamim. She really cared about mitzvot Rabbanan. She asked every detail of her life in a halachic light from chachamim, and she did exactly what they said. So she was completely dedicated, not just to the Deoraitas, but also to the Rabbanans. So that's my proof, says Rabbi Yehuda. You see that the sukkah that was above 20 amah is kasher, right? Now, why is the Gemara bringing this Braita? This is the end of the Braita, okay? We had a Mishnah, and this is the parallel story in the Braita. Now, why is this significant? Because you remember right before we mentioned two different ways of understanding the machloket between Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Shaya said that the machloket is when the walls don't reach the schach. But if the walls reach the schach, nobody argues that is kasher. So the only scenario in which Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda disagree is when the walls are short. The walls are short. The sukkah could be big. The walls are short, don't reach the schach. But Rav Huna said, no, it depends on the size of the sukkah. If the size is 7 tfachim only, mamash kacha, then there's machloket between Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda. Bigger than that, a large, nice sukkah, nobody disagrees that is kasher, even taller than 20 amot. Right? Now, this becomes a massive problem. Because obviously, the case of the sukkah of this queen, Hilani, is machloket Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda. They are literally fighting about this case. So certainly, the sukkah of Hilani Amalka is machloket Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda. Now, I understand if you tell me that the walls of her sukkah didn't reach the schach, because that's what kings and queens do. They want to get airy, nice, breezy sukkah with a draft from the top. So that I understand why it would be machloket Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, because the walls didn't reach the schach. But are you really going to be for seriously? You're going to tell me that her sukkah was 7 tfachim? She's a queen. She would never make a 7 tfachim, little tiny sukkah. Her sukkah was massive. So that's the kasha of the Gemara. Says, I understand Rav Oshaya, but I understand Rav Huna. Says the Gemara, let's read it inside. Bishlama, says the Gemara, 3 lines up from the bottom. If you tell me like Rav Oshaya, that the machloket is when the walls don't reach the schach, that's when Chachamim say it's pasul, and Rabbi Yehuda argues that's kasher. I understand. It is the derech, it is the norm for a queen to have a sukkah that is airy and nice, and the defanot don't reach the schach, right? Fine. Mishum avira, because you want to get air. If you want to tell me that the machloket, the only scenario that Chachamim argue with Rabbi Yehuda is a small, tiny 7 tfachim by 7 tfachim sukkah, v'chi darka shel malka leshev besukkah ktana? Which queen sits in a 7 tfachim sukkah that you could barely fit your body in? So Rabba bar Rav Ada answers. Says Rabba bar Rav Ada.
Is that the same Rabbah that we had?
No. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba bar Rav Ada, lo nitzrecha ela lesukkah suya kitoniot kitoniot. We're talking about the sukkah that has been compartmentalized. Has different little rooms in it, right? The Gemara says, wait a second. Same question. Which queen sits in a sukkah that is so small that every room in the sukkah is 7 tfachim by 7 tfachim? You have to be sardines to go inside the kitoniot. The Gemara says, no. You didn't understand what I'm saying. Amar Rav Ashi, lo nislecha ela lekitoniot sheba. Says, no. Her sukkah was massive, ginormous. It was massive. It fit hundreds, if not thousands of people. Because people came to see her, and she's the queen. And she had a table, Kiyad HaMelech, longer than this Amud Yomi table. No, well, not. It can't be longer than this, but, it was close to this, right? But then she had like a private thing for her privacy. She wanted to put makeup, whatever it is that she wanted to do. She had a little room over there for privacy. She wants to change. She wants to do whatever it is that she wants to do. That's the kitoniot. It's not that the sukkah the entire thing was compartmentalized to small little sardine rooms, but she had small things of 7 tvachim on the side. And we are speaking about those, if those are kasher. So says the Gemara, Rabbaran Savri, Chachamim, who say it's pasul, they are disagreeing with Rabbi Yehuda, they hold Baneha Besukah Ma'aliyavu Yatvi. The sons were sitting in the big sukkah, and that's why nobody said anything to them. Ve'i Yatva Bekitoniot. And she sat in this little thing, having her privacy. Mishum tzniuta, because it's not tzniut. She realized that she's a center of attention, and she would go, unless she needed to meet someone, she would be sitting in a privacy of her little cabin there in the sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda savar bana gabavu. Rabbi Yehuda said no, the sons would come visit her as well, and therefore if the sukkah kitana was pasul, Chachamim would have said something, because the sons are chayav to sit in a kosher sukkah, and therefore from the fact that you see Chachamim didn't say anything, you see that this small sukkah also is kasher, even though that is taller than 20 amot. Va'afilu hachi lo amru la davar. And with all of that, Chachamim didn't say anything, so that's my argument, says Rabbi Yehuda. Fine. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak, Amar Rav Huna. Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak said, not everyone has this Amar Rav Huna, this is Talmud of Rav Huna, he said a direct quote from Rav Huna, Halacha sricha shteh machzeket rosho v'rubo b'shulchano. Now, later on in Masechta, Tav Kaf Chet, we're going to have, we alluded to this yesterday as well, we're going to have a discussion what exactly the minimum shiur of sukkah is, right? It's going to be a machloket also between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. What happens if you have only your body in the sukkah, but your table, your shulchan, your sandwich is outside sukkah? Is that kasher or is that pasul? So says the Gemara, Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak says, halacha is, and this is the halacha, sricha shteh machzeket rosho v'rubo v'shulchano. The sukkah's minimum size is 7 tefachim. 6 tefachim for your body, 1 tefach for your sandwich, for your shulchan, right? Shulchan, we don't talk about massive shulchan, that's small private shulchans. That's the minimum size of a sukkah. So says the Gemara, who is this like? Amale Rab Abba. Rab Abba says, surprisingly, he says, Keman, Kebet Shammai. Oh, you paskening like Bet Shammai? Because we'll see that there's machloket Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. Bet Hillel hold that if your body, the majority, Rosho verubo, your head and the majority of your body is in the sukkah, you're good to go. Kasher. Bet Shammai says, no, that's pasul. You need to have Rosho verubo veshulchano. You need to have your head, your majority of your body, and your shulchan in. which is at least a tefach by a tefach bigger. So it can't be 6 by 6 tefachim, it has to be 7 by 7 tefachim. Fine, so says the Gemara, well, you're passing like Bet Shammai versus Bet Hillel, right? We all know the Gemara in Yevamot, on page 13, the Daf Yud Gimel, the Gemara says, Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, there was a heavenly voice of a bat kol that came and said, Halacha is always like Bet Hillel. To the degree that Gemara says, Bet Shammai b'makom Bet Hillel, say it, Eina Mishnah. It's not even considered in existence. We completely delete and disregard Bet Shammai when they're arguing with Bet Hillel. It's as if it doesn't exist. So says the Gemara, you're passing like Bet Shammai versus Bet Hillel? Amar le ela keman. He answers, he says, of course, passing like Bet Shammai, right? Ikadam. There are those who say they're a little different. Amar Rab Abba says to him, the Amri Lachmani, if they ask you who you passing like, what are you going to say? Amar le, and he answered him, Bet Shammai velo tazuz mina. It is Bet Shammai, and do not move and deviate from it. Right? Don't you deviate from it. Now the Gemara says, wait a second. Before you get too excited about Bet Shammai versus Bet Hillel over here, maybe you misunderstood the entire thing. Because the Gemara in Machloket Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, later on in Daf Kaf Chet, may be talking about not a small minimum sukkah. Maybe the Gemara is not discussing what's the minimum size of a kosher sukkah, but it is discussing a completely different sugya. A large sukkah. And this, many people, certainly in Eretz Yisrael, everyone has this question that I'm going to say right now. But here, I checked a bunch of sukkahs 2 weeks ago before the Chag, and a lot of people have this. The half of their sukkah is kasher, half of their sukkah is pasul. When the sukkah is adjacent to your house, right? And a part of it is under the awning of the house. So you have no farakuma, right? All of that, maybe you can't sit there. So you have an area, a nice area of sukkah, which half of it is pasul. Okay? So you have a shulchan there. The shulchan is sitting, the women are sitting on the pasul side. You're sitting on the kosher side, and sometimes the kosher side is like a sliver, right? It's a sliver. In Eretz Yisrael, they make them like that, every floor sticking out a little bit more, enough to have a bench for men to sit there, right? And women sit on the other side of the balcony, which is under the awning. The awning is the balcony of the top floor, having their own sukkah on top, having to have a kosher sliver, right? So you're sitting there, and your table is here, my sandwich, my plate is sitting under the awning, I'm sitting under the schach. That is the machloket bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. You're not talking about a 7 by 7 sukkah. We're talking about the case the guy sitting, he is in his sukkah, his shulchan is in the bayit. His shulchan is under the awning, it's pasul. Is that kosher? So Bet Shammai there say, no, it's not. We are choshesh that once a person is always drawn after food, right? It's not a new thing. Even in time of the Gemara, people will be running after food, right? So if your plate is there, we are concerned that you're going to end up eating it under the ceiling and stuff, under the schach. You have a laser thing there, right? And we're concerned we don't let it. Where you're sitting and where your plate is, everything has to be under schach. But no, we're not so concerned. If you are under the schach, Rosho verubo is in the sukkah, even if your shulchan is in the house, no problem. That's the machloket bet Hillel and Bet Shammai. We're not talking about minimum size of sukkah. We're talking about a big sukkah that you're sitting in this position that your plate is in the house and your body is in the sukkah. Let's read it together. Says the Gemara, who says that you read the machloket correctly? Matkifla. See, the line starts with tazuz mina. Matkifla Rab Nachman bar Yitzchak mimai de Bet Shammai besukkah ktana pligi. Who says that the machloket Bet Shammai Bet Hillel is in a sukkah ktana, in a small sukkah? Dilma besukkah gedola pligi. Maybe they are speaking about a machloket is about a large sukkah. Uchkon diativ apuma de metelata is sitting by the edge of the sukkah. And your plate is already, your table is already in the house or under the awning. It's in a pasul place. The Bet Shammai Sabri Gazina Masechet Succah. Bet Shammai say we are concerned. You may be drawn after your shulchan, after your plate, after your food. Or Bet Hillel Sabri Lo Gazrinan. And Bet Hillel hold, no, we're not concerned about it. V'daikonomi, and says the Gemara, the diuk is, how do I know that this is the machloket, not a minimum small sukkah? Because of the language. The language of the Gemara is Misha haya rosho verubo besukkah v'shulchano b'toch habayit. It doesn't say sukkah hamachzeket. Doesn't say sukkah that only fits your body and not your shulchan. It says if you happen to be in the sukkah, your shulchan happens to be in the house. So it's mashma that we're speaking about the large sukkah. Bet Shammai poslin. If you're correct that he would be talking about the minimum size of sukkah, he should have said a sukkah that fits your body, not your shulchan, versus a sukkah that fits your body and the shulchan, and therefore that is the machloket. The Gemara next time is going to pick up whether or not Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel actually argue about the minimum size of sukkah being 6x6 versus 7x7, which Bezrat Hashem will pick up in the next shiur.